elect Donald Trump the President of the United States, have they now been or will they be forgotten again? To help us answer that question, we're pleased to be joined again, by Pedro Gonzalez, Assistant Editor of American Greatness, amgreatness.com, Mount Vernon Fellow of the Center for American Greatness. Pedro, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Forgotten again. This is very much, I think you're going in a direction that Conrad Black was going in a piece that he wrote for Epoch Times, that Trumpism without Trump is neither possible nor actually desirable, but let's just focus on the possible. The idea that the 74 million, many of the 74 million people that voted for Trump on November 3rd, that they are just going to easily be moved over into whoever parrots Trump over the next 2, 4, 8 years. That's very much in doubt, isn't it?
It is. I think Trump has changed the game in a number of ways, and one of them is that he is such a celebrity, that he's such a charismatic character that I think we're sort of expecting the next person to be able to match his charisma, which is not a hard, which is a hard show to follow.
There's something else to this. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something else I wanted you to comment to as part of this, as sort of a corollary, which is, Trump built on the percentage of minority voters from the Latino community, the percentage of voters from the black community that a Republican presidential candidate got best in 60 years. And so, naturally, we're just going to continue building on that. And it will build on it even more if we have somebody who checks more identity markers than Trump did, like a Marco Rubio or a Nikki Haley. And that is also very much in doubt, because if it was that easy, then we would have had a Marco Rubio as the nominee, or we would have others who check more identity boxes doing a better job helping the Republican Party advance the percentages of those communities voting for Republicans pre-2016.
Yes. No, that's exactly right. I think this is an issue now, is that because Trump did do better in some respects with primarily with Latinos, that now we're looking to people like Marco Rubio, but that's just a mistake, I think. And what's being missed, and what I've written about, is the fact that the largest part of this coalition is, and will continue to be working class whites. And yet they are the group that no one wants to acknowledge. They're the group that take a back seat to, when we create these like platinum plans specifically for black voters, we create the American Dream Plan, which, ironically excluded everyone but Latinos from the American Dream Plan. We create things like this. We're not acknowledging the largest part of our base. And if we're going to create these sort of race-based plans for groups, then we have to also believe that there's not a single downscale white community in this country that could also use a capital infusion, that there's not a single white family that could use scholarships for their children to go to better schools, which the American Dream Plan provides. So I think that an unexpected turn of the Trump administration in the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years, is a turn toward thinking that we need to check these identity boxes, that we need to focus on basically trying to beat the Democrats at their own kind of racial spoils game. And the latest iteration of that is people looking to Marco Rubio as the successor of Trump for that reason.
And it's interesting to note, taking constituencies for granted. Well, Mark Penn had a good piece in the Wall Street Journal about, his overall takeaway was about how moderate the electorate is generally, nationally. But as he looked into the exit polling with respect to Trump, it's very interesting. With so much focus on white women, white suburban women generally, Trump's margin of victory among white women increased from 11 to 13 points. But his advantage among white men narrowed from 30 to 23, went from plus 30 in 2016 to plus 23. So for those people who said whoever was voting for Trump and did vote for Trump in 2016 will be with him again in 2020, a significant outside the margin of error portion of white men were not.
Right. If you compare 2016 exit polls from CNN to 2020 exit polls that were compiled by, it was a project in partnership between the Associated Press and Fox News. It's actually pretty comprehensive. If you compare those two data sets, what you have is 71% of non-college non-college white men, so working class white men, in 2016 went for Trump, compared to 64% in 2020. That is significant, and that is cause for alarm. This is the group of people that I think gets made fun of the most. You know, the uneducated white men who work with their hands and vote for Trump because they don't know any better. If you're losing them, there's a problem. And I think my theory is that the problem is we abandoned economic populism for all, and we kind of started to resort to gimmicks, you know, criminal justice reform, these kind of plans for different groups, courting rappers, like bringing like Ice Cube into the White House and bragging about how he was the one that asked for $500 billion exclusively for black communities, and then, you know, asking Bloomberg to run a story about that. This is stuff where if you voted for Trump in 2016 and you're living in the Rust Belt and not a whole lot has changed for you, and then your political capital is being used for these kind of games that, you know, people are playing, I think it might make you either stay home or vote for Biden out of resentment. And this is, I think this is a question that we should be asking, and it's one that I've found two reactions. Disbelief, you know, that's why it's just not possible. The exit polls must be wrong. And the other one is anger. That, well, you know, if those non-college white men didn't vote for Trump this time around, considering the stakes, well, then, like, they're dumb, and they deserve every bad thing that's coming to them. Well, and those are two bad reactions, in my view.
Did they vote for Biden, or did they just sit this election out?
That's a good question. I think that is a question that that's something that we should be investigating. What happened? Did they flip, or did they stay home? If you read my article, you'll see that the internal view in the White House, and I know this is true, was that basically, where are they going to go? They can't vote for Biden. Like, they would never vote for Biden because Biden is so terrible. So there's kind of this view of, like, they're between a rock and a hard place. And that may have backfired. And I think this is a good question. Did they actually just stay home, or did they go for Biden? I think we're still trying to figure that out. But what we do know is it does look like a portion of non-college white men stayed home. And the issue was never, you know, we're going to have like a mass exodus. The issue was always a small number of them either staying home or flipping could be devastating. You know, like 5% of them. That would be enough to either put Trump within the margin of fraud, where he could be overcome by fraud in a close election, or could actually cost him the election. Even if he would increase his percentages with like blacks and Latinos by you know, significant amounts, if he lost just like 5% of the white working class vote, that could cost him the election. Just simply because it's a numbers game. There are more whites. This is the biggest part of his coalition.
Right, and there's some overlay, I think, with this number too. I mean, you know, you can cut obviously the crosstabs a lot of different ways, but among moderates, self-identified moderates, Trump lost that cohort by 12 points in 2016. He lost it by 30 points in 2020. That was the biggest delta of any crosstab, at least that Mark Penn looked at. And his conclusion, moderate men swung the race to Mr. Biden. When you're saying moderate men, I believe you're necessarily including a lot of quote-unquote working class men who are pragmatic and transactional, not philosophical in nature when it comes to their vote.
I think that's right. I think that those are, yes, that's a really good way to view them. It's what did you do for me since I voted for you?
Right.
Where's the infrastructure plan? In 2017, there's an array of polling that showed that most Americans, it's like 2/3 of Americans said that the most important promise, the single most important promise that Trump made was the infrastructure plan. And that never happened. That took a backseat to criminal justice reform second, and then first to the tax cut plan that was created by Gary Cohen, who was the former president and COO of Goldman Sachs. So I think those are two indicators that we're being kind of taken advantage of here. You know, that we voted for this guy and nothing's really happening for us. We're seeing some marginal increases in income in some places, but it's just not. It's kind of like we're overpromised and underdelivered. And I think that has actually played a huge factor in this. And I think you also saw independents break for Biden in this election. Few of them voted for Trump. than in 2016. So again, I think you're seeing this kind of like you said, the pragmatic voter kind of saying, well, we tried Trump, now we're going to try this guy.
And forgotten, the forgotten men and women,
Yes.
or forgotten man, to borrow from Amity Schleys. That's from a policy perspective, but there's also something else that's important, and that is the explicit overture to particular populations. There are differences in the way that people live in America and how people perceive themselves. And so you have to make some specific appeals that vary a little bit from coalition partner to coalition partner. And so when
Right.
you're making overtures to Black and Latino families, great, super. Obviously,
Right.
I wish we got 100% of Black and Latino families, not 12 and 32 respectively. But it also but when you advance an issue like school choice, which he spent a lot of time in the last half of this year talking about and became part of the conversation rallies with the school shutdowns, and that's great because parents want their kids in school. And so here's what I'm going to do, what we can do at the federal level to essentially voucherize the Department of Education and provide scholarships. But as you were saying, that's an opportunity to make an appeal to, yes, Black and Latino families in urban centers, and also lower to middle income families of all races, including whites, the white working class, in suburban, exurban, rural areas as well. And that was an opportunity that perhaps was missed to remind those constituents that he is still out there fighting for their interests and has ideas for improving their lives.
That's right. No, that's exactly right. So I live in the Midwest, in this a town in Ohio that's 96% white. It's I think 2% of the population is Black. Even less of that is Latino. I'm obviously Latino. So what does the Platinum Plan or the American Dream Plan do for my 96% white town, in which the poverty level is higher than the state average? And I'm as the odd Latino in this little Midwestern town, I'm better off than, not much better off, but I'm better off than pretty much all of my immediate neighbors. And to be honest, I kind of felt a little bit of shame when Trump announced the American Dream Plan, because I see my neighbors who have Trump flags on their porches, who are really struggling, and here I'm going to get, a scholarship for my son to go to school if this thing would have been enacted, and then stuff like that, just because of the fact that I'm part of an ethnic group that the administration is trying to court, but my neighbors who are struggling would get nothing. In fact, 96% of my town would get nothing. And I think that there is a kind of resentment that you create, not just for the Trump administration, but also I would be concerned that you create a resentment for people, for groups, basically. When you're kind of throwing all these different groups a bone and conspicuously excluding one group, then that one group is probably going to start feeling resentful towards the other groups.
Yeah, I mean, it's just this is such an important piece, and it's just it's a mistake. As good as Trump was in terms of advancing sort of a populist message that at least attempted to be colorblind, it's so easy to fall into the trap of the left by starting from their identitarian premises and then getting their pernicious identitarian conclusions, which disenfranchise people that could otherwise be in your camp. It's just a siren song from the left, at least for conservatives, I think. And I think that's where you're going with this. So I appreciate the piece and your thoughtfulness as always. Pedro Gonzalez, assistant editor of American Greatness, amgreatness.com, and a Mount Vernon fellow of the Center for American Greatness as well. Pedro, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
After 25 years of building websites for all kinds of companies in many different industries, AmericanEagle.com realized a well-designed website is also your best employee, bringing efficiency, revenue, production, showing up every day, giving above and beyond to increase your bottom line. That's what a website designed, developed, and hosted by AmericanEagle.com has brought to so many clients. An AmericanEagle.com website is a 24/7 branding exercise, building rapport and thus brand equity while you sleep. Companies like WeatherTech have relied on AmericanEagle.com's website design and development and hosting capabilities for years. When some of the world's top brands need a reliable company to prepare their sites for high-traffic events, who do they call? AmericanEagle.com. Their clients have come to rely on them for a full line of website services, from consulting and strategy to digital marketing, hosting, and maintenance. Give the team at AmericanEagle.com a call today. 1-877-WEB-NOW. The number 1 is the number. AmericanEagle.com is the website. 1-877-WEB-NOW-1 is the number.
Hey, you know that Abbey Getaway giveaway that we're doing? I forgot to mention that it's a Harborview suite, and then it also includes 2